All right, so we're on 154, and dealing with contracts that aren't necessarily following the official language in the Torah or the language of the Mishnah. And what do rabbis do? How do they enforce those contracts? So they're sort of folk contracts or things that develop among the locals. And it's related to our first Mishnah, which was about local custom and honoring local custom. So they give examples of some contracts that would actually have an official way, official language that would come from the Torah, but it didn't work that way for whatever reason. They didn't have an expert there to make out the contract, and what do the rabbis do with it? So I'm on 154. We went through this last time, so I'm going to go through it a little quicker. It's an interesting story. Well, you'll see. I mean, and then it continues with some stories about marriage and ketubas and marriage contracts, dowries. Hillel HaZaken. So this is Hillel, goes back again to the first Hillel. So the time of Jesus, before the destruction of the temple. Hillel HaZaken Hayad Doresh L'shon Hediot. So Hillel would honor these lay contracts. Titania. We know that from the following story. Anshe Alexandria Hayu Mekachin et Neshotehem. So the people of Alexandria would betroth their wives, so there'd be an engagement. And I said before that the engagement would last exactly a year. And then the chuppah would be a year afterwards, where they would have the actual marriage ceremony. But for most halachic purposes, with the engagement, they were married. Anyway, so Hayu Mekachin Neshotehem Uvisha'at Knisatan L'chuppah, on the way to the chuppah. So on the way to the chuppah means sometime in that year. It doesn't mean literally in the car on the way to the chuppah. Although you imagine that's sort of what it sounds like. On the way to the chuppah, they meet somebody else and they get married, like the movie The Graduate. Like they're actually getting married, and she decides to marry somebody else. So that's not actually the scenario here. It's during that year, in the interim of the year between being engaged and being married, something happens. Yes.
Is this one of the local? You were talking about local mores.
This meaning what?
Waiting a year.
No.
I mean, is this stated somewhere?
Oh no, it's not. So yes and no. So it's not stated somewhere, but it was a widely practiced custom to wait a year. Just like I have to say now, we because people wait. Well, there's all sorts of reasons. I mean,
you make sure she is not pregnant with somebody else.
Yeah, that's not.
You don't need a year.
What the Talmud actually gives very specific reasons for waiting. It's that you need time to collect money, to afford to buy a house and a household for the.
Raise money for the dove, for the dowry.
Yes, that's right. So it's time to raise money and also to raise money for the wedding party. So you get a year and then you start saving money for it. So that was also they would most likely be underage. So then maybe you engage them when they're 12 and they don't get married till they're 13. I'm not exaggerating. Not unusual in ancient times. So and just like it's funny. Now we also wait. I mean, why do we wait? Somebody says, "Will you marry me?" Yes, and then 9 months later they get married, whatever. And a year later, right? Why not? Well, let's get married right now, because that's the custom. The custom is you wait, and some of it's the same thing. Like we have to have time to plan the party, but also there's like a psychological dimension too, which I know because I work with lots of couples where, yes, I'll marry you, but not right now. We're not ready. They're not. They need the time to get themselves psyched for it. So I think there's a lot of that.
You have to find a place to live. You have to
That looks a little
figure
like
things out.
micromanagement. But then what is the Talmud micromanagement?
Yeah, right. Without micromanagement, then there's no civilization. That's my. All right, anyhow, uvishonat knisatan lachuppah, ba'in acherim v'chodvim otamehem. So in the way to the chuppah, which means really in the interim, other people would come and grab them, and it doesn't mean they kidnap them. It literally means the wives would fall in love with somebody else. Remember, they may not have met the groom, or they met the groom one time.
These were arranged marriages?
They're arranged marriages, so not all of them, but right, maybe they met the groom one time, so they meet somebody else, they fall in love, and they figure, okay, I'm not married. I'm only engaged, I'm not married, so I prefer you. So I'm gonna and they would have marriages. So there'd be all sorts of halachic problems. The main halachic problem is, so they'd marry somebody else, and they would have children. And then somebody might come along and claim it's an adulterous marriage because, in fact, you were engaged to somebody else, and you had children with another person, which was actually your second husband then. So it's an adulterous marriage, an illegal marriage. So the children then would be mamzers, which is incorrectly translated as bastard. That's the only translation we got. But the mamzer is the issue of a forbidden union. And the most common forbidden union in ancient times was adultery. Okay, it also includes incest, by the way, other things too. Marrying a high priest, marrying a divorcee. It's also any type of illegal union. The result of that is a mamzer, but the most common was adultery. And the question that this raises is this adultery because they were engaged with somebody else, but they were never married. Yes.
Something there is that I mentioned this before. You're visiting on the children. The city,
yeah, for sure. Yeah. We may have ethical issues with the whole system, but they're not dealing with those right now. Actually, in some ways, they are. They're looking for loopholes to get out of a system which creates all sorts of problems for innocent people. It does, yeah. Okay. So there was the rabbis who felt that these children, according to the letter of the law, would be mamzers. Amar lahen Hillel Zaken, but Hillel said, who was an authority in those days, Heviu li ketubat imchem. So Hillel would say, bring me your ketubah. What he meant was the ketubah of the marriage that didn't happen. Let me look at that ketubah. This is still what happens today. If a rabbi wants to make the children not mamzers, you will look at the ketubah and you say, well, this original marriage, you're claiming it's adultery, but this original marriage, maybe there was something flawed in that marriage. So let me look at that ketubah, because if the ketubah is not proper, then the first marriage wasn't valid, so the second marriage is not adultery at all. So I'll just tell you, I actually just read about this, and I don't know, you may be interested. If you are, we can talk about it more. But there's something that annoys, rightly so, that annoys Reform and conservative rabbis about Orthodox rabbis, and that's that they don't accept our marriages as being valid. So this starts with, in America, it starts a long time ago, but it became a big issue in America with Moshe Feinstein. So Moshe Feinstein was at a time when there could be one rabbinic authority in the United States for all of Orthodox Judaism, which is decidedly not the case now. But he was the last one. So and he died about 30, 40 years ago, and there was 500,000 people that went to his funeral. And he just happened to be respected by modern Orthodox and Hasidic and all the many variations of Orthodox Judaism. Anyway, so he made a ruling that the marriages of Reform and conservative rabbis were not valid. And if he had said something else, then there may be a whole different system right now in America. There may be much better cooperation. The thing is that he made that ruling because he was looking for ways to free these mamzer children of that taint. Because there were people that would come to him and say, I never got a get, but I have a child now, I never got an official divorce. So he would say, well, let me look at your ketubah. And he looks at the ketubah and says, who's this rabbi? And they'd say, well, that was my rabbi. Is he a conservative rabbi? Yes. He said, oh, your marriage was never valid in the first place, so you've got nothing to worry about. I'm not kidding. He was looking for a way to dissolve those marriages because he was, and really there are memoirs, there's evidence for this. So he wasn't looking for a way to insult Reform and conservative rabbis. He was using a loophole. Really, he was using a loophole to make those marriages illegal in order to free the children of that taint. Now, did he know that would create very, very big difficulties in the community? Now I don't know. He might have. He might not have.
It's like saying that nobody else is valid except.
So we know from the record. He and he had the reputation to get away with it. He would look at ketubas and he would find flaws. So there weren't under his watch. There really weren't any mamzers in the United States, right? And really, it's just like Mike say, he felt the whole system was unfair, and he was going to find a way within the law, because the law was important to him, within the law to free up these children. So he was an interesting guy, and I don't know. You can blame him, you can judge him however you like, but that was the origin of him disavowing the Reform and the conservative marriages, and because we know that many Orthodox rabbis would still consider those marriages valid, because the fact is, it doesn't take much to make a valid marriage. If the bride and groom exchange something, forgive me, if they had sex, it's pretty much it's a valid marriage in Judaism. It doesn't matter who officiated and who signed the ketubah. All that stuff is really just ceremonial. I mean, and we know that because they require a get. The most observant halachic Orthodox rabbi still requires a get if you were married by a Reform rabbi.
Right.
Because they know the law. The law is that it doesn't take that much to be married. So Feinstein was looking for a way to free up those children. And so he just makes this ruling: Reform and conservative marriages are invalid. And he had to come up with a reason for that. So that creates problems in the community today. But what's interesting is the origin of his thinking was to try to find a way within the law.
Didn't have
Yes, right, exactly.
Now that we know that the treatment is worse than the disease, couldn't we look back at this and say, well, maybe we should reevaluate this and make some changes? And second, the issue is, I mean, here is a self-appointed keeper of the religion, and who appointed him? Himself. And why should we be listening to him? Because he appointed himself this wonderful position.
Well, he didn't appoint himself. He certainly didn't appoint himself. I mean, he was. It was accepted by consensus. He actually was a. I mean, I'm not defending him or blaming him, but he was actually himself a very modest person. It was really the strength of his learning and his charisma, and he was actually thought of as
Orthodox Jews who are self-appointed keepers of the religion.
Okay, so that's good. So I mean, you say like, well, shouldn't we do something about this whole mamzer issue? So who's we? Is we you and me? So if it's you and me, yes, you and I can just decide that the whole thing is morally untenable. But the issue is that you've got a whole system, you've got a whole community, and
you can't think of everything, and there seems to be no way to, once somebody's in the Orthodox religion has made some pronouncement, it's hard to undo it. I mean, you have Ashkenazis who won't eat corn or rice on Passover, and Sephardics who will. And it goes back, I'm sure, to some ruling a long time ago that nobody will reverse.
Well, all legal systems have barriers in changing the law. I mean, we might find things in the Constitution that just seem reprehensible to us. And what were they thinking? So we've got in American law ways of amending the Constitution, but it's very, very difficult. So the same thing's in Jewish law. Jewish law is actually very flexible, and there are ways of changing Jewish law. The thing is that it just doesn't happen easily. And the way the community is structured right now, it doesn't happen through vast consensus, because there's no such thing as vast consensus anymore. There was a time, the Talmud itself represents a period where there really was a consensus about how to do things. There was disagreements, but there was a consensus about the broad system and how to make changes in the system. So right now we live in a very, very polarized time, not just Jewishly, by the way. I mean, in America, it's a very polarized time. So by the way, I mean, if you're curious, I mean, conservative and reform rabbis, there's really no such thing as a mamzer anymore. It's not like we just X'd that out of Torah, like that's gone. We don't like that. However, we find ways within the law to deal with it, and you're not going to have a mamzer in conservative and Jewish law, and you're not going to have something like an agunah. An agunah is a woman that can't remarry because her husband is not giving a divorce. So we have found ways around that, and because we don't accept them ethically, and we find loopholes within the law to change those things that we find really ethically reprehensible. So the Orthodoxy in general is slow in those things, in general, and also because we do them, they automatically assume it's terrible, and you can't do that. So it slows it down even more.
You have Israel and the right of return based on these rulings, which then makes it...
makes it what? I don't know. It makes it just kind of a mess. It's true. Yeah. Right. Okay. By the way, I'll tell you. I mean, as long as we're bringing it up, and I didn't expect to spend the whole time on this, but there recently there was a law in Israel that was passed that if a non-Orthodox rabbi performs a wedding in Israel, you're liable to 2 years in jail. The rabbi and the couple. Yeah. So if I do that, I'd like you to visit me in jail. It would be very interesting to spend 2 years in jail. I mean, I'm waiting for them to arrest the first Reform rabbi that performs that and sends them to jail. That'd be very interesting.
I can't understand the logic of what you said, because if you say that none of these marriages were valid, then doesn't it make all the children that were born to those people who thought they were married mamzers?
No. To say the ketubah is invalid is not to say that the union was illegal. So that's an important distinction. A mamzer is the issue of two people who are not allowed to get married. That's all it means. So from that's all it means. So
Those who are not married.
no. So if I'm single, and I have sex with a single woman, and we're not married, and she gets pregnant, it's gewalt, right? It's too bad and it's embarrassing, but it's not actually illegal. It wasn't an illegal marriage. We didn't get married. An illegal marriage is I am not allowed to marry my sister. So anything that comes out of that is a mamzer. I'm not allowed to marry somebody who's already married. So anything that comes out of that's a mamzer. However, two people that are living together and having children, their children. That's why bastard is not a good translation. Mamzer is in Jewish law the result of an illegal union. So Feinstein wasn't creating all these mamzers from the fact that my ketubah is from a conservative rabbi, my father, doesn't create any, even in the most orthodox circles, any taint on my children. It just means that we've been living.
YouTube is illegal. He's just saying it doesn't exist at all.
Yeah, that's right. It's not a marriage, so it's a.
Yeah, but when I got married, we had two rabbis.
Although I tell you, it's a slippery thing because and it's confusing. I admit it, but the ultra orthodox would say if I get a divorce from my wife, God forbid, I'm sorry, I'm just using that as an example, I would need a get because they do understand. So some of this becomes intercommunal politics too.
When I got married, we had two rabbis because I came from an Orthodox background. So the official rabbi who married us was an Orthodox rabbi. But we were very close to a Reformed rabbi from Hillel. So he was there too, but he didn't marry us. He was there to participate, but he never married us.
So the sad thing is now probably that wouldn't even happen. There wouldn't be enough cooperation.
You have to understand, I came from an Orthodox family. My father and parents would not have stood me for getting married by that Reformed rabbi. So my wedding was very, very real, very traditional, and very officially accepted that way.
But they allowed a Reform rabbi to be there and be part of it. So, again, I'm telling stories, and we should turn off the. Here's something that happened to me. So this has to do with just the weird politics of it. So there's several years ago, someone came up to me and said, "We'd like you to officiate at our marriage." And I said, "Wonderful, I'd love to, Mazel Tov, and I can't wait." And so they said, "But we want you to co-officiate because we have two favorite rabbis. We have you and it's another rabbi. I won't mention his name, but he lives not far from here. and we're going to ask him. And so we would just love it if you two would, just co-officiate together." And I said, "That's wonderful. That's just a great idea. I would love to do that." And and we want to have it at Bethel on the lawn. We had a lawn in those days. It was before. And I said, that's a great idea. Deep down, I know that's not going to happen. I mean, it's not because of me. I just know he's not going to do it. I mean, for all sorts of reasons, he would never co-officiate with me, and also would never have it at Bethel. I mean, it would just be they're non-starters. But I figured, you know what? Let them find out from him. So all right, so they go. So a couple of weeks goes by, and so, we've kind of rethought things a little bit, and we want you, and we want and we mentioned a Chabad rabbi, because he just he's our third favorite rabbi. So and I said, that's beautiful, that's great, exactly, but you'll co-officiate. We'll have it here at Bethel, and I said, great. I can't imagine a better simcha than that, and they, and I know that that's not possible. It's not going to happen, but I want them to find out themselves, because I want them to know that it's not me that's saying no. Right, because I'm going to do it. And so, of course, a couple of weeks later, it's just not going to happen. And I have to say there's something very sad about that, too, because, what's a community, really? Do we really live in a community if that's, you can't have a simcha together? So what Mo's telling us is there was a time when this wasn't the case. And it's in our living memory, which is sad. I mean, people are growing up now with the idea that it's always been this polarized, but the fact is it hasn't. I mean,
it was not much of a problem.
No, when my father went to rabbinical school, most of his classmates were Orthodox Jews, but they were going to the seminary, which ordained conservative rabbis, because they thought it was a good place to study. They liked the quality of it, but they were bringing their orthodoxy to it, and there was nothing wrong with that. There was no tension, and now there's not any possibility of that. So
what has pushed this increased polarization?
Yeah, it would take a long.
Holier thou
That would take a long time. So I actually have a theory, but it would be which was there's a very good article about it. I'll just mention that, and you can look it up by Aaron Soloveitchik. Aaron Soloveitchik was, you've heard the term Soloveitchik was one of the great rabbis, not Moshe Feinstein. He was more of a spiritual leader, Soloveitchik, but his son is a professor of history at Yeshiva University. And now he's actually a rabbi, too. He's a rabbi of the Spanish-Portuguese synagogue in Manhattan. So he wrote an article which kind of explained the polarization of American Judaism, and I thought it was really, really brilliant. So I recommend you read that. It's about a 60-page article. It's not that hard to read it, but I think it, I've never read such a clear and non-sort of judgmental, just analyzing the historical forces post-Holocaust that came to play in the United States. Aaron Soloveitchik. All right, let me read a little bit more. We got a few more. Anyway, so what happened to these marriages? Excuse me. So Hillel, who's playing the Moshe Feinstein of his time, kind of looking to release these women from the taint of mamzers and adultery. Havilu ketubat iman, bring me your ketubas of your mother. Matzah shekatuv bahem. In the ketubas themselves, it said something it's actually not valid language, but it was something that was common in those days. We will not become married until we get to the chuppah. Although with Jewish law, they would have been married with the engagement. But in the ketubah, it said we become married once we're in the chuppah. So Hillel honored that language, even though the language wasn't correct. V'lo asu b'neihem mamzerim, and therefore the children were freed from that taint. Okay, I'm going to read a little bit more. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha hayad doresh l'shon hedyot. Another example, a rabbi that honored this lay language. Ditanya, Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha omer. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha said, next page, hamalvet chaveiro, a person that makes a loan to his fellow, lo yimshachena yoter mechavo, shouldn't take as a pledge something that's more valuable than the loan itself. So we understand how that works. You borrow money, and as a pledge, I will give you my motorcycle, just to make sure that this is sort of like an old-fashioned hawking something, or right? But this was common.
Well, sometimes you get a rowboat or something, and you have to leave your driver's license so
right.
that you could.
That's
right.
It's
the same kind of a.
That's right. That's
I
right.
want to make sure.
And this evolves, of course, into mortgages. Mortgages is a loan. It's just a loan, and the bank owns the bank that owns the house. But when the bank has the house, you own the house. But the bank has the house as a pledge if you don't pay the loan. If you don't pay the loan, they get the house. So this could start with just like your driver's license or a motorcycle. I need to borrow $1,000, and I'll give you my motorcycle. I'm not giving you the motorcycle, but if I don't pay you back, or maybe we put the motorcycle in storage, and I give you the key. I get the key, but this is your insurance that you're going to get paid back. Okay. So what Rabbi Yoshua is saying, that pledge can't be worth more than the loan itself. Okay. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay.
But mortgages and everything else, that's not the case.
No, it's not. Right. Although no, the fact is for. I think that's not correct, right? Maybe I'm not an expert in this, but the house is worth exactly what the loan is because you're borrowing at the beginning. Yeah, things appreciate and depreciate. Yeah.
But even so, you usually get a percentage of the value.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you can see the complications that arise. So here it's saying flat out that thing shouldn't be worth more because the danger is that you didn't pay off your loan. I'll take your motorcycle, and you're actually getting much more money than and the feeling is that wouldn't be fair. Okay, so I'm just trying to understand the feeling. So then it says shekach kotev lo because it's written. Now, when it says it's written, it means it's written in unofficial language. This isn't halakhic language, but this was the general practice in these loans, which Rabbi Yeshua is honoring. So he's honoring this language. Tashlum ta di'it lachalai kol kabel dichi. What I owe you is just what I owe you. That's kind of what that means. So then you're not allowed to take more than what I owe you. And if the motorcycle is worth more than that, then that's not fair. So let's find a pledge that's worth more or less. They couldn't know to the penny, but let's find a pledge that's worth the loan exactly. So if I can't pay you back, you don't get more. And of course, this raises the question of what if it's worth less. They'll get to that. But we start with what if it's worth more. Let's make sure it's not worth more. Okay. Now, that becomes, like I said, a lay contract, an unofficial contract, which this Rabbi Yoshua is honoring. And Rabbi Yoshua is actually making that law. He's codifying it into our law and saying that becomes now our practice because it starts as a folk practice, but because the folk are doing it, we're making that now part of Jewish law. Okay, now they go back and forth a bit on it. Talmud katav lehache. Okay, so the reason is the reason, this is what it means, is the reason because it was written in those unofficial contracts? Ha'ilo katav hache lehache. Lo kanya? What if they hadn't written that? So what if that sentence is all I owe you is what I owe you? It's actually pretty vague language. But if that wasn't there, at that point, would he be able to take the motorcycle? Or would you be able to have the motorcycle as a pledge? Like if I'm the lender, I could say, yes, I'll lend you the money, but I need your motorcycle as a pledge. And then I might be thinking, look, I know this guy's never going to pay me back, and I'm going to make money on this. I'm going to give him $1,000, and I'm going to get back $1,500 in the motorcycle. Right. So is that possible if there's no other written contract? So does it have to be written? And this is where, now nowadays it sounds strange to us, because almost every contract is written. But in those days, writing materials were expensive and getting lawyers and rabbis, and some things were just not written. So they're wondering, what if it wasn't written actually in the contract? Let me just finish. V'hamar Rabbi Yochanan, this is Rabbi Yochanan used to say, Mishkeno ve'eshiv lo hamashkon umet shomtome al gabe banav. Okay, so Rabbi Yochanan, we'll have to figure out why this is relevant, but Rabbi Yochanan made this ruling. There was a pledge. Now, in the course of the life of the loan, he gave him back, let's say it's a motorcycle, okay? So I give my motorcycle as a pledge that I'll pay back the loan. He, for whatever reason, gives me back the motorcycle. Why? It's not clear. Maybe I needed it one day. Look, I need to use a motorcycle. Fine. So the motorcycle is now in my custody, okay? Umate. The borrower dies. In this case, it would be me, right? So I die. Shomtome al gabe banav. The lender is allowed to go and take the motorcycle away from the heirs. Okay, that's what Rabbi Yochanan says. Okay, now why is that relevant? It's relevant because in law, if you actually have the right to take something from heirs, that means you actually acquired ownership of it. Otherwise, you'd have to wait through all. I mean, did he leave it to you? What did the will say? What was the will of the person who died? But in this case, it doesn't matter. As soon as a guy dies, I can show up at the house and say, "Hey, I'm taking my motorcycle, and I have a right to it, whether or not I have a contract on it, because he left it for me as a pledge." So what Rabbi Yochanan is implying is that the pledge itself really automatically reverts to. Doesn't matter how much it's worth. The pledge itself automatically reverts to the lender. It doesn't matter how much it's worth. So the Rabbi Yochanan, in some ways, is a challenge to the idea that it can only be, because another way you could look at it is that what the lender could do is go to the heirs and say, look, your dad owed me $1,000. I need that $1,000, and they could say back, okay, I understand that's a debt. There's 50 other debts that we have to keep in mind. We're going to make a list of them, and we're going to pay people off. The check's in the mail. Right. We'll figure out when we're going to pay you off. But thank you very much. And that's the other possibility. Rabbi Yochanan is saying no. That motorcycle, that was my guarantee, so I'm taking that motorcycle. So what that means is that the lender always actually had the motorcycle, retroactive.
Priority claim.
He had priority claim, right, with that motorcycle himself, which means that it's the pledge itself that he gets to get back, no matter what it's worth. Whereas the Rabbi Yeshua would say, no, that's not fair. You're just another debtor like everybody else. So having a pledge makes you a priority. What did you call it before? You have a priority claim on it.
You have to perfect.
Okay, well, we'll continue.
What you're doing. The only way that doesn't work is with a pawnbroker.